again, and welcome to the Author Roundup. This special segment of the Book Connection Show showcases emerging indie authors who join us for a discussion of their newly published books. Join us for a conversation with our next guest author. Hello there, and welcome back to Author Roundup. I am your host for today's wonderful episode. I am joined by Janell Flores Bolte. Janell communicates daily with nature, her ancestors, and her deceased husband. She is a soul coach and a certified mindfulness-based stress reduction instructor. She also serves at the Northern California VA teaching mindfulness and brain health practices. She is a graduate of the Alma Institute and the creator of numerous online and in-person courses and workshops. She is now the author of her book, Death, a Love Story. The End is Just the Beginning. Janell, hello, how are you?
So good, Emma. It's so nice to be here.
It's so nice to meet you. Can you tell us a little bit about your published book?
Absolutely. So, my elevator pitch for the book is, it's a book about the strange and miraculous relationship that I have with my dead husband. And usually that kind of stops people in their tracks. They're like, wait, your dead husband? So yes, in fact, I communicate daily with my husband, John, and I believe that it is not a superpower that I have. I am not special. I truly, truly believe that every single person on the planet has the ability to connect with their people, their beloveds on the other side. And so, as the subtitle says, the end is just the beginning. So it's a mashup of like ghost, eat, pray, love is kind of how I would describe it. Yeah.
I like that. Well, yeah, I just want to say I'm so sorry for your loss. Grief is, really hard, and losing someone so close is awful. And I'm so sorry that had happened to you. But yeah, so I want to start talking a little bit about what you do, and then we'll go into your book a little further. So in the introduction, I mentioned something that you are a soul coach and mindfulness-based stress reduction instructor. So for people that are watching and listening, who aren't familiar with those specific titles, what exactly are those?
Yeah. So I'm going to go back just a tiny bit, and I so feel your heartfelt, your words about John, and I appreciate it very much. And I believe that just right off the beginning, that grief is one of those things that that it is like a spiral, like you keep revisiting it. So even when your person passes away, you still get to be in that space, and it changes and it morphs and it evolves. But I really like to remind folks that feeling, that light, that energy, that charge that moves through the body that we call grief, it's our life force energy reminding us that we loved very deeply. And so I think there's nothing to be sorry for in that at all. As much as I feel it's something that we say in our culture, like, I'm so sorry for your loss. And also, I think what we're really saying is that place in me understands, maybe not fully, because maybe you haven't lived it, but there's a place in me that feels compassion for the place in you. I just feel like it would be so much because there's nothing to apologize for in death, There is something it's part of life. It is this cycle. And so I would love, like so many things that I talk about in the book, I would love to change the way that we right. Yeah. So the discourse around death, I feel like is something that really deserves to be changed. I mean, and so I feel you. And also it's one of those things that I'm like, I think when we say
Yeah.
Feel like there is so much compassion. I have so much compassion for what you've gone through. I mean, yes,
Oh, yeah.
like it's just
I
really
like
powerful.
that.
Yeah. So, okay. So you asked me, what's a soul coach
Yeah.
and what mindfulness-based stress reduction? So, yeah. So I'm going to go the opposite to start because I think one will definitely inform the other.
Okay.
So, I wasn't always a teacher. So, I was a consultant for a really long time. I helped nonprofits
Um,
create programs. So I was a programming consultant,
oh,
launched programs, and that was my job for a long time. And when my daughter was 3, she had a near-death drowning incident at our local pool. And
oh,
I write about it in the book. And after this incident occurred, notice I didn't say accident because I really do believe that there is the potential for growth in everything that happens to us. So this
mhm.
incident definitely became a catalyst for me to go headlong into the space of panic attacks. And so
Mhm.
right after I started having panic attacks, especially when I drove. And so um, I had been a meditator for most of my life. I was taught to meditate by my aunt when I was 6, and I'd always sort of relied on meditation. And when the panic attack started, it was a clear signal to me that I needed to like go back to the cushion, figure some
Yeah.
stuff out, meet some of that anxiety and sit with it. And so for 6 months, that's definitely what I did. And it
Mhm.
helped a lot. But I always say that Tara's drowning was sort of her sacrifice for me because it forced me to do some deep inner work because 6 months
Mhm.
later, John was diagnosed with cancer. So when John was diagnosed, when my husband was diagnosed, he was completely asymptomatic. There was no
Mhm.
signal to us at all that he had cancer. But when we found out that he did have cancer, it had already metastasized from his lung to his brain. So
Mhm.
within a matter of, 24 hours, our life changed so dramatically. It was completely upended. Um,
Mhm.
so I knew that I had to do something. I knew that I needed to create a space for myself if I was going to be working, you know, raising 2 kids, caring for a
Mhm.
husband with a terminal illness. Um,
Mhm.
Thank God I had the wherewithal to know that I needed to do some self-sourcing as well. So I had heard
Mhm.
about this program called mindfulness-based stress reduction. It's actually been around for a really long time. It was created in the 70s by just this little known guy by the name of John Kabat-Zinn, who is like super famous. And like, if you're in the mindfulness
Mhm.
space, everyone knows who John Kabat-Zinn is. So John and Saki Santorelli created this program in the 70s.
Mhm.
It's the most well-researched mindfulness program in the planet. It has so much scientific backing, and I am a total witch. I completely own it. I completely accept it. I'm very mystical. I'm
I love
also
it.
really, as you know, data. I love data as well. I mean, I just asked you a question about data before the interview started.
Yeah.
I'm so interested in like data and like what things are about on the back end. And so
Mhm.
I really appreciated that this program had so much research behind it. And I thought, if
Um,
I'm going to do this, I want to do something that I know is going to create some sort of a change. So I took this 8-week program and it totally changed my life. And after the course was over, I took it again for a second time. And I realized the second time that I took it that I really wanted to become a teacher. And so I
mhm.
ended up studying, and so I became certified to be a mindfulness-based stress reduction teacher. It took, it's a really long process. It's pretty rigorous. So it took a few years for me to get the
Mhm.
certification, but I was able to teach after about a year and a half and then went towards the certification. And what I
Mhm.
noticed is that people who were in my class would take this 8-week course, and then afterwards they'd be like, this is so amazing. I have all these incredible tools to be able to, face my life with more resilience. But now what? Like, what do I do? And
Yeah.
so that led to me seeing people one-on-one and
Oh,
doing some deep work. And so really looking at like what are the limiting beliefs that are holding them back from fully embracing this? What's the transformation potential here? How can we together alchemize, your life so that you can be living like your highest purpose? And so
uh-huh.
what happened is I just started working with people, and that became a huge part. So my day job is that I work within the crucible of people going through major transformation, whether they're, in an illness, whether they're just divorced, whether they've gone through the, grief of, I'm trauma informed. So the grief of losing, a partner or a
Uh-huh.
beloved, you name it. If there's transformation happening, I've been there. So it's really exciting and beautiful. So yeah, so that's my day job. And then my night job, a couple nights a week, it's so beautiful. So I'm part of a research team that is studying the effects of mindfulness and brain health
Mhm.
on vets that have PTSD and mild
Oh, wow.
brain injury.
Mhm.
So I get to work
That's
in that
cool.
space as well. So there's that trauma space, and it keeps me on my toes. And there's so much beauty that's in that work. So yeah, so I've been doing this now. It's been almost a decade. So
Wow.
whenever people ask why I do the work I do, it's because of John. I
Mm-hmm.
would not be sitting here, and so
Mm-hmm.
every day you can see how it's very easy for me to continue communicating with him because the work I do is because of him. I joke that he was my first student. So when I was going
Aw.
through the process of becoming
Yeah.
here, John was my first student because he was newly diagnosed. There were things like surgeries and radiations and chemotherapy and clinical trials. There was so much going on. So
Mm-hmm.
he had me going through body scans, awareness of breath meditations, being in the present moment, all of these things. We got to do it together.
Mm-hmm. Wow. So the course that you took, so did he know that you had interest in taking something like it, or was this all once he passed away? So he was,
He was alive. Yeah.
oh, he was.
So
Okay.
I started taking all of the coursework when John
He
was alive.
was
So
alive. Oh,
John,
okay.
like
Yes.
6 months after Tara's drowning, John was diagnosed, and I
Mm.
was like, I got to take this class. And so right out of the gate, that's when it all started. So he got to see me
Oh,
through
gotcha.
the whole beautiful transformation that I was going through myself.
Yeah.
And yeah, so I taught for, I guess, probably about 5 years before he crossed, 5 or 6 years, and
Oh,
then he
oh, okay, gotcha.
crossed. So he got to see me as a teacher,
Oh,
and
that's so cool.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So I've been doing this work for a while. So John, I will be celebrating the 5 year anniversary of John's crossing, actually not too long from now on November 14th. So
Oh, wow. That's
yeah,
crazy.
yeah.
And something that's really interesting that you mentioned, like the course that people can take and then they get out of it and they're like, what do I do now? It's so cool that you like provide one-on-ones for them because, like during the course, they're just giving, be given tools and like introduction. And then with you, it's like, okay, this is how you can use it for you specifically. And I'm sure you like dive into like them as a person and like their past and like trauma and things like that. So that's really cool that you take it to the next level. So that's really interesting that you do that. I love that.
Yeah, I mean, it's sort of it naturally morphed. So now I'm only teaching the evening. I'm only teaching
Yeah.
the course that's in the evenings, and my
Mhm.
teaching business has just
Gotcha.
it just grew out of that. So now
Yeah.
have to take MBSR in order to work with me. Like
Yeah.
anybody, I have clients from all over the world that
Oh, wow.
with one-on-one who, I mean, it's been a while. And so, word spreads, word of mouth. Someone tells a friend or a
Yeah.
confidant, like, oh, I
Mhm.
work with this woman. So it's been a really rewarding, but it started there. So that's how it all
Yeah.
started was it began, the coaching practice began just from people wanting more. And so over the years, I have studied a lot of modalities. I've gone back to school. I've had a lot of
Mhm.
training. Um, but yeah, so yeah, really beautiful.
Yeah. And so let's get into your book then. So in your book, you mentioned that the signs of communication from your husband began almost immediately after his crossing, like you mentioned. Can you describe some of the ways he communicated with you?
Oh my gosh. Well, there's so many. I mean, to this very day, I mean, there's things that happen all the time. So right out of the gate, what's interesting is my aunt, who I mentioned
Mhm.
earlier, the one who taught me how to meditate when I was a little girl,
Mhm.
she crossed a couple of years before John did. And
Um,
when I learned of her passing, she was already in a coma, and we immediately like
um,
got in the car, like drove down to Southern California where she was, and
mhm.
she crossed by the time we had got there. I missed that moment by about 30 minutes. So
Oh my
I was
gosh.
with her and she was still warm, and I was able to sing to her and to tell her how much I loved her. And it was right before Christmas. So she crossed on December 1st. I think it was 2017. And I was just I was so sad. I was in such a space of grief, and it was right before the holidays. And I remember
Mhm.
my kids were like, "Are you gonna like do Christmas? Like, do you plan on like getting out of your pajamas and putting up a Christmas tree?" Because they were really little, and I
Yeah.
was so sad. It just seemed like the most daunting task to
Yeah.
actually come up and do it all. And so it had been a couple of weeks, and I got a call from a really dear friend who lives in North Carolina. And she said, I had a dream last night that I think I'm supposed to tell you about. And I was like, okay, what was the dream? She said, we were on a train and you were the bartender on the train and you were making lemon drops. And you were like slicing these lemons and putting a lemon on top of a glass and then pouring sugar over the top and then pouring the vodka over the sugar. And it was kind of like the lemon was like a sieve that everything
Uh-huh.
poured through. She's like, it was this whole ornate thing that you were doing at the bar. She said, and then I felt a presence come up behind me. I felt the presence of a woman behind me. And
Oh my
she
gosh.
whispered into my ear, Mija, don't forget to enjoy the sweet. And then the dream was over. And so she said, I think I'm supposed to tell you that Auntie Carmen wants you to remember to enjoy the sweet. And she knew about Auntie Carmen. This is a really close friend. And
Mhm.
hija, which is a term of endearment in Spanish, which means like my love, my daughter,
Mhm.
is a word that she doesn't even use. It's not in her vernacular to say mija regularly. So I really felt like it was
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
Auntie Carmen communicating with me. So I felt like, okay, she's with me. Christmas may begin, like I was like, hey, here we go. Let's do Christmas. And so we got a
Yeah.
Christmas tree and all the rest. Anyway, I tell you that story because when John crossed, a few months after John crossed, I got a text from my kid's kindergarten teacher. And this is a teacher who we just loved in our household because both my kids had her, but I don't talk to
Mhm.
her regularly. It's not like
Mhm.
we're not connected, but she emailed me or she texted me and she said, uh, it said, the message said, I'm not sure if this will make sense to you, but I had a dream last night. And in the dream, I was on a train with John, and John was holding a lemon tree in his lap. And
Oh
he wanted me to know that these lemons were special because they were savory lemons. They weren't sour, they were savory lemons. And she's like, I have no idea what this dream means. I don't need know if it'll mean something to you, but there it is. And I was just like, John
oh,
knew how much that dream meant to me. He knew that that dream with Auntie Carmen pulled me out of this crazy depression. And he knew that a way to talk to me would be to like, I mean, I don't know how he knew that the teacher was, but I don't,
yeah.
they know things. And so I was just so, it was just such a, like, that is such a dramatic, like, but it happens like that because stuff like that happens, my dear. Like, how do you ignore that? It's just so beautiful. And so, I mean, the woman from North Carolina did not know my kid's kindergarten teacher. There's no way they could,
There's
and
no way.
I never talked about it. It's not like any, but the only one who knew about the dream was John.
Oh
And
my
people, like friends of mine who I am close to, but no one else knew about the dream. So stuff like that happened. Like John when John crossed, he crossed at 4:44. And so there'll be the 444 is like a number that comes up for me all the time. Um
God.
moments after he crossed. There was a weird, like a really strange ad that came on. Like we were listening to the Pandora station when he crossed, and he
Mhm.
crossed at home. And and like 30 minutes later, there was the weirdest commercial. I was with my sister in my room about stem cells, and I'd never heard like this. I'd never heard this commercial before, this stem
Mhm.
cell commercial. And what's weird is that Auntie Carmen had like she was a huge proponent of stem cells because she had like issues with her knee. So she had had stem cell injections in her knee. And that
Mhm.
commercial felt like it was Auntie Carmen's very beautiful, playful way of saying, like, we got him. Like, he's here. Like, this stem cell. I was like, we looked at each other, we're like, stem cells? Like, what the hell is this commercial? And I was like, Auntie Carmen, like, she was a huge proponent of stem cells. She was even in a commercial about stem cells, like in her local,
Oh my gosh.
like she was like the stem cell queen. And
That's
John and
so
I laugh about it. We're like, she's like a stem cell celebrity. We would totally joke about it when he was alive. And then the very first commercial that comes on is like for stem cells. It really felt like she was saying, he's here, he's with us, we've got him.
yeah.
This was really special. Yeah. So
Oh
stuff
my
like that.
God.
Like it was that immediate. Like within 30 minutes, the other side was saying, like, we're all
Yeah. Very good. Yeah.
we got you.
Oh my gosh. And so since this happened with your aunt and your husband, so how did this like new way of communicating shift your relationship and understanding of connection beyond life?
What a beautiful. I love that question, Emma. I love it
Oh,
so much. I love that question so much. Um, and we touched on this a little bit before the
mhm,
interview began,
mhm,
and maybe even a little bit once it started. But I think that if more people knew that death isn't the end,
mhm,
I think I have such a much clearer understanding because our culture really promotes living in fear of death. Like it is something that we
mhm.
like death, like we should be, see, I even said it, deathly afraid of. We should be deathly afraid of death. Um, but I think that I think we've got it all wrong. I really do. Um, I really believe that maybe the other side is the real life, and maybe this is kind of this
Mhm.
is the dream. Like I've been toying with the idea of my next book, and I've been thinking about the title, and the title might be "You're Already Dead." Like, what if we really
Oh, yeah.
were already dead, and that place, that what we call the other side, is
It's
actually
the real
it's
side.
it's the real side. And
Mm,
what we do here is we're meant to grow as a soul when we're here. We're meant to learn lessons and we're meant to love and we're meant to connect with one another because we have bodies. And part of having a body is that we get to touch each other and we get to
mhm,
communicate in words and we get to hug trees and look at sunsets and eat good food. Like,
mhm,
it's the whole thing. Like, we were here to experience the fullness of having a body. And if
mhm,
we thought that way, we would be so much more respectful to each other. We would be so much
mhm,
more living in our integrity and living in alignment and like looking for ways to grow, looking for the possibility of transformation. So I feel like now that I know that I can talk to John, it's a different way of communicating. So we definitely
mhm,
communicate in the language of like symbol and dreams and
mhm,
nature. But there is an ongoing conversation that is happening between he and
mhm,
between Carmen and I. But I think that it just opens the door for so much more possibility and so much more access. And it really has released me from fear, from fear.
mhm.
Because ultimately, almost everything is a fear of death. I mean, I
Yeah,
could probably take it down every single trauma I've ever heard from any human being that I've
yeah,
worked with. When you get to the very, 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 very core of it, it is the fear of death.
yeah. And a lot of, what people do or don't do stops them from doing things because they're scared of, something will happen or like what ifs and things like that. And that can really, put a damper on your whole life as far as, well, this life. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, yeah.
And living your life for other people too,
Yeah.
right? Like so many people I know are like so afraid of what other people think and so afraid of other people's judgments that they dull their shine. And we are here to shine, my dear. We are
Mhm.
here to shine and to live our best life. That's the whole
Mhm.
purpose.
Yeah. I think you mentioned earlier about like a spiral and how you can describe, like, I guess, describe healing as a spiral, and it's unique to each person. What advice would you give to someone struggling to find their own path of healing or in grief?
Yeah. Yeah. Um, so I'm sure you've heard of Elizabeth Kubler-Ross. She has
Mm.
like the 7 stages of grief.
Yeah.
So what a lot of people don't understand or have it's been misquoted is that Elizabeth actually wrote those for someone who was receiving a terminal illness, like someone who is getting the news that they were going to be crossing. And
Oh,
somehow it's morphed over the years that people think it's
lost
for,
in translation.
yeah.
Yeah.
So people think that those 7 stages of grief are meant for us, but they're not. And so I think for so long people have thought that I'm supposed to be here. And then from there, I'm supposed to move into here. And then from here, but it's not like that. It is not linear.
No, I didn't
It's
know
not,
that.
yeah. So it's not linear, right? You will
Yeah.
experience this wave and then you will come back to it again. Something will trigger that sense in you. So I think that my advice would be that the feeling that you're feeling, and I kind of said this earlier, so when
Hmm.
you think about grief, and everybody experiences it differently, but grief isn't just psychological, it's in your physiology too, right? So people will describe the sense of grief as like my heart feels heavy, my body feels like I just want to like get down on the floor. I feel like the tears are always coming. I can't stop ruminating. That loop of like memories keeps going through my head.
Mm-hmm.
So all of those things, if you're working with mindfulness and you have like this present moment awareness, then what you do is you feel the feelings and you release the story. So sometimes what we identify as grief can for some people be like it's not grief per se, it's shame and regret and it's
Mm-hmm.
things I never said, things I wish I would have said, yada yada yada, right? But if you allow yourself to feel the feeling, like feel the weight of your heart, go ahead, get down on the ground, get close to the earth, feel the weight of
Mm-hmm.
your heart, let the tears flow, let
Yeah.
whatever that energy is move through you without the story, like really paying attention to the somatics. So I also do somatic experiencing with my clients, which is just like being in the felt sense of the body, like being with your body,
Mm-hmm.
feeling that and allowing that what you're feeling is life force energy. Like
Yeah.
it's life moving through you. And sometimes
Mm-hmm.
when life moves through us, it doesn't feel comfortable, but that
Yeah.
doesn't mean that it's bad, right? So I think people have associated grief with that feeling of
Mm-hmm.
discomfort that feels bad. But
Yeah.
what if we flip the script, change the narrative, and you say,
Yeah.
this is the feeling that I'm feeling of life force moving through me because there was so much love and there was history that was there. When you say
Mm-hmm.
that, there's this, it shifts it a little bit, and there's a sense of I'm going to have compassion for that part of me, and that's really what the grief wants. Like that grief,
Yeah.
it's can I get underneath it? Can I get underneath it and create some compassion for this place? And it doesn't come quickly, right? So it's neuroplasticity. You're changing your brain
Mm-hmm.
when you do that. You're
Mm-hmm.
creating new neural networks, and it takes a little bit of time. Um,
Mm-hmm.
so I would just my advice would be allow yourself to feel it, not the story. So this is the thing is that when people say like, oh, I feel it, but then I can stay in that place, that's because you're telling
True.
story. So the
Mm-hmm.
story is going to keep that flood of like hormones kind of coursing through your body. But if you
Mm-hmm.
feel the feeling itself is an arc, right? It has a beginning, it has an intense middle, and then it has an end. And what happens is most of the time, a lot of us will get to that really intense end or that really intense middle and we'll be like, I can't handle it. I can't handle it. And then you drop out and you avoid or you overeat or you drink too much or you overshop or you just put it away.
Mm-hmm.
Meditation is, can I allow myself to get to that place and feel the fullness of the feeling because it does
Mm-hmm.
dissipate. Every feeling
Yeah.
follows an arc. It always follows an arc. And so
Mm-hmm.
getting through the arc, community helps too, having support
Yeah.
too.
Yeah. Yeah, I feel like just like hearing all of that grief really, yeah, it really does have like a negative, yeah, like energy sometimes, like grief sometimes is like trauma, right? Like sometimes it's just so hard for people to get over, and it can, yeah, like create like, you know, difficulties in your life as far as like you as a person, and like, yeah, where does it all like, how do you deal with it? Because a lot of people don't deal with grief, like you mentioned. They don't feel like they've had closure. They don't, know what is not known or could have been known with that person. And I mean, grief can just like create different, different negative parts of your life, from that point. So yeah, it would be nice for a lot of people to have positives out of it rather than just, like continuous like negative and negativity that can, you know, have a lot of different and affect different aspects of your life too, with your relationships, you as a person, your life. And yeah, it can all be heavy, I guess is what I'm saying. So it'd be nice, yeah, for it to, be more of like a release and more of like a positive thing.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, it's interesting because we live in such a, especially I think in the United States, other cultures have a much healthier way of being with death and being with
Yeah.
grief. Um, and I think here we live in such a binary state in our minds, like This is good.
Mhm.
This is bad. This is right. This is wrong. And
Mhm.
I think that it's much more nuanced than that. I think there's a lot more gray space than we give this credit for. So
Yeah.
I'm not saying bypass your grief, not at all. I'm not saying
Yeah.
that it's valid and real. It absolutely is. The invitation is to go ahead and allow yourself to feel it separate from the separate
Mhm.
head, right? I keep touching my chest, like I keep putting my hand on my chest. So
Yeah.
kind of the invitation is, can I move the grief from my head, from my thinking mind? And can
Mm.
I move it down into the space of my heart? Can I move it down into the space of my belly where my
Mhm.
intuition lies, where I can really ground and root in and talk to my ancestors? Um, I don't think we can make grief a cerebral thing because it's not
Mhm.
cerebral. It's so intuitive, and it's so and it is uncertainty, right? Because we don't know
Mhm.
up here. The only place that we really know, and I talk about it in the book, is that there's this knowing in the body, and it's like gnosis, Gnosis, like that
Mhm.
knowing on a visceral level. It is that
Mhm.
place of connection, it's that place of knowing, and that is not in the mind. The mind
Mm.
it is a wonderful follower. It is a terrible leader. If you want to lead from your heart, lead from your gut, from this place of deep, deep rooted wisdom and intuition. Like
Mhm.
that's where you go. Even my voice went deep when I said that,
Yeah.
like that knowing,
Yeah.
knowing,
Pretty cool.
knowing.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense. So as far as your book, I'm interested, how is it like outlined? You mentioned that it is like a practical tool, it's a guide, but is there also like your personal like story in there? Like is there a balance? So how is it outlined for readers? What can they expect?
Yeah, so I actually have the book. It's broken up into four parts. So the first part is called Birth, which is really about how John and I met. And then the second part is called Death, which goes through, the story of his transitioning. The third part is called Rebirth, which is how I picked myself up off of the kitchen floor.
Mhm.
I still had I still had two kids to raise, and
Yeah.
and a dog and a house and beautiful work that I love. So I mean, I still had things that I had to do. So how did I get myself up off of the puddle that was me crying on the floor, which happened, around my
Mhm.
house. Emotions are allowed to flow. You're allowed to feel what you need to feel.
Mhm.
So the third part is rebirth, and then the last part is our practices. So I share
Mhm.
the practices that got me off of the kitchen floor, the practices that I kept returning to over and over and over again,
Mhm.
that created this sort of reminder of being present, being in the moment. They're very simple, really simple practices. They're a wonderful beginning, no matter if you're a meditator or if you're not a meditator. And on my website, if you prefer not to just read them, because you can read them in the book, but if
Mhm.
you want me with my own meditation voice to through the practices, all the practices are on my website as well. So
Oh,
you can
that's so
like
cool.
let me guide you through
Yeah.
practices. So yeah.
That's cool because you have a very nice, like beautiful,
Oh,
very calming voice. So that's cool. That's awesome.
yeah.
Um, and so this is an interesting thing to note. You emphasize that connecting with loved ones don't necessarily have to, have traditional methods like crystal balls and anything like that. How can everyday experiences, like we mentioned, dreams and interactions with strangers, become meaningful signs from the other side? And how can people look for that type of interactions?
Yeah. So I think one of the first things, and this is where having a mindfulness practice is really important. So, and I haven't, told you what my working definition of mindfulness is. And really, mindfulness for me, it is just paying attention, like paying attention on purpose, right? And like being
Mhm.
present in this moment. Um, so one of the things I think that is critical is that you've got to be open, right? You've got to be open and
Yeah.
paying attention. And so when you do that, when you invite this in, when you invite in connection and you're looking, so um suddenly, when you see that feather that's on the path, you don't just disregard it as a feather. You have to be paying attention because honestly, the signs are around us all the time. Our loved ones are trying to talk to us all the time. We're just not paying attention. Um,
Mhm.
Most of the time, I'd say, a huge percentage of our culture lives in like autopilot. We're in autopilot. We're doing the same thing over and over again. We're not paying attention. We're in that default mode network area of the brain, and we're just sort of going from task to task, and we're completely unaware of the rest of the world, the larger world. And
Mhm.
so I think I teach brain health as well as part of what I do with the vets. So, a lot of neuroplasticity, it's dependent on us opening up to experiences because those
Mhm.
neural pathways, the ones that are nice and worn and predictable, like we've worn the ones that kind of lead, like that are comfortable. So this
Mhm.
really takes you like I'm going to look outside of like I'm really going to be paying attention and I'm
Mhm.
going to be looking for things. So as you do
Mhm.
that, things will happen. You will notice feathers. You will notice like pennies. You will notice that the song that your wife loved is playing in the background at the moment when you most need it. You will catch
Oh
a
my God.
snippet of a conversation in the background that gives you the exact thing that you need to be doing that particular day. So as you're
Mhm.
paying attention and these things happen, first is pay attention. Second is acknowledge when these things happen. Don't
Mm.
just dismiss it as coincidence, because a lot of times we'll say like, oh, that's weird. That's like the fifth penny I found in the past week. And it's like, no, it's not just the fifth penny you found in the past week. It is someone trying to talk to you. It is like their way of communicating. So
Mhm.
it's getting really excited, telling people about it. The moment you start telling people about it, the more it happens. So just with this book being out, the book's been out for about a month now. I
Mhm.
have had more people connect with me saying, "You will not believe what happened to me when I was reading your book." Like,
Oh
I
my
feel like the
gosh.
book itself is like a frequency for it's kind of like you putting a big giant sandwich board on your body, telling your beloveds, I'm listening, I'm paying attention. I mean, I could tell you, so I'll just tell you one or two really quick. So um, one of them was this woman was on her way to Italy. She was on a plane to Italy. She was reading the book, and she's like, "You are not going to believe what just happened." On the plane to Italy, she's reading the book, and sitting right next to her is a woman who was on her way to Italy. She had her father's ashes in her carry-on because she was going back to spread his ashes in Italy. So of course, that
Oh
led to
my
that
gosh.
on the way back, same woman on the way back from Italy, she's like, "You're not going to believe this. I'm sitting next to a woman who had just come back from Italy. Her husband had passed like a month before, and it was their dream to go to Italy together. And this beautiful, amazing woman was like, I'm going to go to Italy and I'm going to do what we were going to do together, and I am going to love him there, and I am going to do
Oh,
things that we were going to do together. I'm going to do them physically by myself. But of course, that led to like this beautiful conversation. And she's like, oh my
yeah.
gosh, read this book and get into that. Right. So that's one. There's so
Wow.
I could go
That's
on and on and on.
crazy.
There are so many. A woman said she was reading the book and she noticed, she's like, I don't know why. I just like something told me that I needed to get up and like fix the screen on the door. She's like, I don't know why. I just got up. She's like, I got a ladder. I was fixing the screen on the door. Her husband, James, had passed like the year before. And she found a katydid, which are those little like cricket insects. Like it
Oh
was
yeah.
like right on top of the ledge. She never would have seen it. It was like stuck like behind the
Mhm.
ledge. So she took this katydid off of the screen and she let it go. And a katydid was James's like he used to like love those insects. And so she's like, if I hadn't gone up, I never would have seen it, but something sort of nudged me to
Or
like
or
up.
two.
So she let it go. And then she said, I came back and I sat down and I started reading your book again. And my notifications went off on my phone. She's like, I never look at my notifications. Like it was an Instagram thing. And she happened to like glance over, and on it was a giant black butterfly. And in the middle of it, it was an ad for like some jewelry store. And in the middle of it, it said, Love James, which was like her husband's name.
Oh my
I
gosh.
know. So she had just,
That's
it was the
crazy.
insect happened, and then he said, Love James. And then it said this black butterfly that said, Love James. So, I mean, I've been
That's
getting stories
wild.
like that, like over the past month with people who've been saying, I'm reading your book and this is happening. I'm reading your book and this is
And
happening.
your book just came out too. That's
Excuse me.
wild. Your book just came out
I
too.
know.
That's
Yeah.
amazing. That reminds, so the side note, but that reminds me, have you ever seen the movie Serendipity with,
No.
oh my
Yeah.
gosh.
I need to
Okay,
join you.
so it doesn't have to do with death. It's about love. It's like a love story, but it's called Serendipity, and it's one of me and my family's like favorite movies. It's all about sign and fate and destiny. It's with John Cusack and I think her name's like Elizabeth something. She's British.
I'm
But yeah, it's
yeah,
so good. You have to watch it.
I will watch.
Yeah,
Yes, that is, and that is the thing. So
all about signs and everything. Yeah.
I feel like that is so I just saw this wonderful meme that I like I wish that I want to like get a tattoo or make like I don't know t-shirts or something, but it says I don't need anyone's approval. Synchronicity is the universe's way of approving. And it's true.
Mhm.
I think that when the sign like you will notice as you live in the present moment, as you practice mindfulness, as you pay attention to the signs, your
Mhm.
life becomes a series of synchronicities that bring you to the present moment. I mean, there's a reason you and I are meeting today,
Mhm.
whether it's something that you said or I said, but there are 8 billion people on the planet, and somehow the universe was hurtling us towards each other all along. If I
Mhm.
had done one thing differently, it might not have been you that decided that was my interviewer. It would have been someone else, right?
Yeah.
So when you live your life like that, everything
Mhm.
has meaning and every person becomes a miracle for you. Like, I don't know what, I mean, you're my teacher today. Like, I get to have you in my life. You weren't
Mhm.
there yesterday, and yet everything was bringing us to this moment. And if you're hearing this podcast, everything was bringing you to this moment of hearing this. If you had done anything differently in your life, you wouldn't be
Mhm.
hearing this message right now. So everything we do is on purpose. Even in those moments when we're like, this is all going to hell in a handbasket, there will be a later you'll have the moment where you're like, oh my gosh, it was bringing me to this. It was bringing
Mhm.
miracle.
Yeah. And I did have a question, but like I don't even think I need to ask it anymore. But if that doesn't like prove to like skeptics that this is like so real, then I don't know what does really. It's
And
like
and here's the thing. There are so many people. It is scary, I think, for a lot of people um to shift the way that they think, and
yeah,
to embrace this.
they're so
So
set in their ways. Yeah.
exactly. And there's this beautiful Einstein, it's attributed to Einstein, but it actually wasn't him because I put it in the book and I talked to the Einstein Foundation and they're like, this actually is misattributed. So it's not actually him that said it. I don't know who said it. But,
Mm,
you can live your life as if nothing is a miracle, or you can live your life as if everything is a miracle. And
mhm.
I definitely choose the latter. I want to live my life as if everything is a miracle because I feel like I'm happier that way. I suffer
Yeah.
less. And there is that when I embrace my life that way.
Yeah, that's true. Like, I mean, we live a life, and why wouldn't you want to do something ultimately to be the happiest? And if that's what it is, then why wouldn't you feel, or go towards this certain way? Um, so, so I did have a question about like your kids. So have they like communicated like with their dad, or how is it like to be like in your household, or like in your family? What is it like?
So my kids are beautifully wonderful, individuating teenager who 100% love their mother. And if what the words that were happening were coming out of someone else's mouth, they would probably be like, yeah, that okay, I get it. But because it's me, they're a little bit like, oh God, mom. So let's see. In my household, there's a lot of eye rolling, but I think they also really do. They see the magic. There's a couple of stories in the book, which I won't give away.
Hmm.
There's definitely beautiful, strange, gorgeous things that have happened. And here's the other thing is that the kids were so young when John was diagnosed. Tara was 4 and Tanner was 6 when John was diagnosed. And when we found out John had cancer, he was given a 5% chance of living like a year. He ended up living
Oh,
6 years. And so the
wow.
kids saw us through 6 years of lots and lots of it was a journey, right? It was this
Mhm.
cancer journey. So when John crossed, Tara was 10, Tanner was
Mhm.
12, and they were right in that space. It was
Mhm.
adolescent. They're like just coming up on adolescence. And
Mhm.
from all we know about the brain, we know that the brain doesn't fully develop until we're around 25 years old. So I'm not
Mhm.
sure that either one of my beautiful kiddos really even have the prefrontal cortical matter to be able to fully experience the grief that is here.
Yeah.
But they will someday. And when that day
Mhm.
comes, I will help them to hold whatever it is that comes up. But I think for kids,
Mhm.
it is a protective measure to like sort of, compartmentalize that until
Yeah.
they actually have the tools and the neural, connect
Capacity. Yeah.
capacity exactly to be able to really feel the full breadth of it.
Mhm.
Um, so I think with children, it is particularly there is patience and there is love and there is live model your life. I think what the best thing we can do
Mhm.
is show them that like it's okay to feel your feelings, show them that there is
Yeah.
grief is a
Absolutely.
process, show them your own healing, and by proxy when the time is right they will open up to theirs. Ooh,
Mhm.
that was
Yeah, it was. Okay, so I guess what inspired for you to write a book and publish a book, and had you had any writing experience prior to this project?
Yeah. So, obviously the inspiration for the book was definitely, all of the wild and strange and utterly inexplicable things that happened. I was like,
Mhm.
no one is going to believe this. Like, I got to write this. I'm like, I got to write this down. Like, this is so crazy. And the cool thing is that in a lot of respects or in a lot of instances, I have pictures. So like there are
Mhm.
pictures of like there's pictures that corroborate the things that I talk about. And if
Mhm.
the pictures aren't in the book. If you go to my website, there's a whole gallery of things because I didn't want it to be all about me having to validate stuff in the book, you know.
Mhm.
So I think I put in like 4 pictures where it felt really like necessary to like show something. But if you go to
Mhm.
my website, there are so many other pictures that are on the website where you're like, oh my God. Um, but there's even like the actual email that I got from the kids' kindergarten teacher with all the emojis in it and everything. Like that's on the
Mhm.
website, so you can go and
Oh,
see it.
wow.
But I think it was just that I need to put this. This is so unbelievable. I need to write it down. And as for
Mhm.
prior experience writing, I've always loved to write. I've always
Mhm.
journaled. I would write about John's journey when we were going through the whole, cancer journey. I would write small
Wow.
snippets of it, just so people could, our friends and family could know
Mhm.
what was happening. But yeah, I mean, I didn't necessarily think, I mean, I wrote a thesis for grad school. I did stuff like that, but I mean, I didn't necessarily think I'd become an author. So it's
Mhm.
definitely, I guess the universe just had it there that I needed to communicate with writing. I mean, I'm used to communicating with my voice and through
Yeah.
words,
Mhm.
but as a teacher, but I guess I've just, yeah, the next step is to
Mhm.
write it down. So.
Yeah. And so, what advice would you give to anyone writing his or her first book?
Oh, don't give up. I would say please don't give up. The world needs to hear your voice. It needs to hear your voice. Every single human being's experience on this planet is important and it's
Mhm.
worth sharing. And don't give up. Don't give up. There's going to be those days when you're not going to want to sit at your desk and you're not going to want to
Mhm.
do writing, but do it. Do it anyway. Um, and yeah, you've got help. That's the other thing I would
Mhm.
tell people is that I think sometimes people feel like it's a solo endeavor when they're writing. Um, but it wasn't that long ago, and at least geologically speaking, a couple thousand years ago, it was pretty normal to like connect with your muses, right? So this idea that there is like this team, this spirit team that's like helping you out. I mean,
Mhm.
I'm not even sure. I mean, I think that like I would sit down at my desk and I would just say, okay, like it would be this miraculous thing where I would start the process of writing and I was present for it. But if I got out of the way, like
Mhm.
mentally kind of got out of the way, the magic would happen. The days when I was like, no,
Yeah.
right, it's got to sound perfect. I, meaning when Janelle tried to be completely in control and holding the reins and having it all like buckled down, those were the
Yeah.
days when the writing was the hardest. And I feel
Yeah.
like the days when I just allowed the words to flow through me and really just said, like, all right, guide me. Like, let's do this. Like, I'm going to
Yeah.
work with everything that's available to me here.
Mhm.
When you feel like you're doing it alone, you have access to a limited amount of information. When you open up to the possibility that you have more support and guidance than you could possibly imagine, suddenly your access becomes infinite. You're going to be connecting to people. People are going to be talking to you. You're going to hear about something. There's going to be a podcast that comes on that you needed to hear. Suddenly, you're like, the trickle becomes like a raging river, and it's
Mhm.
just be about you letting it flow out onto the page. So
Yeah.
it's a really long-winded answer, but that's
And so what do you think your husband would think about your book and you writing a book?
well, it's funny. Like he's already shared with me. I think it's funny because when you write a book like this, it is a memoir. And so of course
Mhm.
there's going to be points in the book I was never intentionally unkind or intentionally cruel, but there's truth that sometimes you share, and not everybody likes it and not everybody
Mhm.
wants it to be out there in the world.
Yeah.
But the truth is for a larger purpose, right? The truth is share the
Yeah.
message, this beautiful message of inspiration, this
Yes.
beautiful message of hope, this beautiful message of what this brave, amazing man, did in his lifetime. And I think that I wrote this mostly for my kids because going back to what we were talking about before, they're not going to remember this the same way I remembered it. This part of their lives is probably going to seem sort of, dreamlike, but
Mhm.
I wanted them to know that John is real and that he loves them, and
Mhm.
that they can always, always connect with him and he will always be there. So.
Oh, I love that. Well, Janelle, I think that's all the time we have today. Is there anything else you want to share with us? Any, like, do you have a website or social media platforms that readers can reach out to you if they have any questions or anything?
Oh, of course. Yes. So, you can, let me see. My Instagram handle is Janell Flores Bolte, and then I have a second Instagram at Death a Love Story. So those are two ways that you can follow me on Instagram. On Facebook, Janell Bolte, and I do have a website, so it's janellfloresbolte.com, just my name, janellfloresbolte.com. So that's another way. I do have retreats that I do. I've got a retreat. I don't know when this is going to air, but I have a retreat that's coming up in November in Santa Cruz. If anybody is in California, I offer retreats. I'm going to be doing there's classes that I offer from time to time. There's always soul
Mhm.
coaching that's available. So there are multiple ways to connect with me.
Awesome. Well, I've loved talking to you. It was awesome meeting you and learning about you and your connection with your husband now, and of course your book. And I hope it inspires a lot of people. And if you want to purchase Janelle's book, you can head to balboapress.com, or it is also available on Amazon. And if you do purchase her book, please leave her a review on Amazon. I know she would like that as well.
I would love it.
Thank you
And it's
so
on
much, Janelle.
Barnes and Noble. It's in all the
Yes,
places.
Barnes and Noble.
People
Mhm.
can buy it anywhere. I mean, you can even go to your favorite independent bookstore because independent bookstores are the best. All you have to do is just,
Yes.
and they will order it for you because it is available everywhere.
That's a good idea about the independent bookstores. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, I love that. So you just go up to the desk and you just
Okay.
tell them the name of the book. They'll order it for you, and then you don't even have to pay for it until it comes. It's so wonderful.
Oh, that's perfect.
Independent bookstores are awesome. I mean, they're so great, and I highly, highly recommend like supporting them because
Mhm.
they are like dinosaurs right now,
That
and
is true. That is true.
yeah,
All
it's
right.
really important. So yes, and leave a review. I love that you
Yes,
said
please.
about the
Please.
reviews. So
Yes.
Goodreads is always awesome. Goodreads and Amazon, do both. That would be amazing. They really do make a difference. So when you leave a
Mhm.
review, it creates more visibility for us as authors. So that's wonderful. I'm always grateful when people leave reviews.
Yes. All right. Well, thank you so much for watching, and I will see you next time. Bye.